Greetings, students. Dr. Phil here. So this is going to be a fairly brief video on managing human resources. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. So the first topic, well, the first thing I want to mention is that you'll often see human resource management abbreviated HRM. So just know if you run across that term, if you hear somebody say HRM, they're just referring to human resource management. So what is human resource management? So broadly defined, you could say it's the policies, practices, and systems that influence employees' behavior, attitudes, and performance. All three of those, will kind of expound upon in this video. So the first thing I want to talk about is human capital. So we think about a human capital as think about the employees of a firm, right, of an enterprise, of a business. So we could define that as an organization's employees, described in terms of their training, how well are they trained, what kind of on-the-job training, well, sometimes we'll refer to that as OJT. What training do they already have, perhaps from, formalized university institutions, baccalaureate degrees, technical degrees, like 2-year degrees, so on and so forth. What experience do they bring with them? What's their judgment like? That can change. Yeah, judgment's kind of inherent, but you have to learn how to apply judgment in a new setting. Intelligence and aptitude. How are they at forming relationships? Sometimes there's kind of a term we can give to that. We call that emotional intelligence, relationship building, stuff like that. How well do you may have heard the expression read the room, and then what insights do they bring with them and offer to their colleagues, subordinates, superiors, and of course the organization at large. So the concept of HRM, again, human resource management, implies that employees are resources of the employer. Now, an organization is better than competitors at something and can hold that advantage over a sustained period of time if it's held to have what's called a competitive advantage. So this is really kind of something out of the economics literature. The idea of competitive advantage is that, you do something better than, or the firm does something better than somebody else and can continue to do so. So human resources give organizations advantages because obviously human resources, the people, the individuals, the employees, they can be hard to find. They may have very technical skills that are very hard to find in the labor marketplace. They're valuable. They cannot be imitated, and there are no good substitutes. So Walmart recently raised the minimum wage for store employees in an effort to attract and retain top workers. So, and in fairness to Walmart, they raised it pretty substantially. And again, they're kind of they're looking at their turnover. They're aware it's kind of high. Okay, what can we do to try to encourage good people to come and to obviously that's just the half of it, but then we've got to keep the people that we've got. So high performance work system. So we can think of this as the people, the organizational structure, the hierarchy, technology, and processes that all work together to give the organization the competitive advantage that we were just talking about. So these could include things like perhaps trying to get new people with new skill sets, development of training programs, so perhaps updating or refining their OJT and OJT offerings, an establishment of rewards for such behaviors as teamwork, flexibility, and learning. So here we see some functions and responsibilities. So analysis and design of work. So what would come under that purview would be things like how you design the job, what's part of that job, what's the job description, the work analysis, the recruitment and selection. So how do you recruit? Where do you post the jobs? What's the interview process, questions, procedures, any testing that candidates may need to do, and also coordinating use of temporary labor. Training and developments, orientation, skills training, career development programs, performance management, things like performance measures, preparation and administration of performance appraisals, and also workplace discipline and compensation and benefits. So wage and salary administration, incentive pay, vacation leave administration, just keeping up with that, insurance, retirement plans, profit sharing, and if the company offers it, stock plans. Some companies will offer employee stock option plans called ESOPs. All right, so there's some of the responsibilities of HR departments. Now, obviously, the list you see here is not exhaustive. These are just some of the things. Employee relations. So things like surveying the employees, labor relations, employee handbooks, keeping those up to date, company publications, labor law compliance, relocation, and outplacement services. They may also deal with things like policy creation, policy communication with respect to personnel policies. So you may have like an employee handbook that maybe you probably sign that when you first go in. They may update it. They may ask you to sign it again. Employee data and information systems, so things like record keeping, keeping up with, the hours worked by employees, how long they've been there, pay rates, overtime, stuff like that. Human resource information systems, things like perhaps like W-2s, pay stubs, so on and so forth, and then things like workforce analytics. So maybe a little macro there, just looking at how many people do we have, how many do we used to have? How many do we need? What are the skill sets of those people? So on and so forth. Compliance with laws. So policies to ensure lawful behavior, reporting, posting information, safety inspections, and of course, accessibility accommodations. And then support for the organizational strategy, human resource planning and forecasting. So again, like what human resources do we think we'll need in the future? How are we managing the talent that we have? And how are we managing change? So job analysis. So the process of getting detailed information about jobs. So what does that job encompass, right? What falls under the purview of that job? How many people would it take to do that job? How long would that job take to do? How technical is that job, right? All kind of root and branch kind of common sense questions that one would ask as part of a job analysis. And job design, process of defining the way work will be performed and the tasks that a given job requires. So really designing the job. Okay, how long is this going to take? Is it too little work for the time allotted? Is it too much? Perhaps we need to, if it is, perhaps we need to create multiple jobs. All doing that with that same design. Recruitment, the process through which the organization seeks applicants for potential employment, and selection, process by which the organization identifies applicants with the necessary knowledge, skills, abilities, and other characteristics that will help the organization achieve its goals. So see, these are some of the top qualities employers look for in employees. Now, I wanted to mention this because, again, a lot of you in a year or two are going to be, maybe sooner, are going to be hitting the workforce. So these are the things that you're sort of getting some advanced warning here, if you will. These are the things that you want to make sure you go into the workplace with. So number one, and these aren't really like in order of, they're probably not really in any particular order, but certainly problem solving skills probably would be the top one. Critical thinking, teamwork skills, working with teams, a strong work ethic, kind of a no-brainer. Analytical and quantitative skills. So think about like mathematical skills. Having those are gonna be a big help to you in the workplace. And finally, written communication skills. So some further responsibilities of human resource HR departments. Training. A planned effort to enable employees to learn job-related knowledge, skills, and behavior. And then, of course, development, the acquisition of knowledge, skills, and behaviors that improve an employee's ability to meet changes in job requirements and in customer demand. So it's not enough just to bring employees in and train them. You got to do that, right? But then you've got to keep them up to date. So that's why a lot of companies will do what's called professional development. Some industries require it. If you're in accounting, for example, you're a licensed accountant, CPA or CMA, then you've got to have a requisite number of hours of professional development each year. Performance management. So the process of ensuring employees' activities and outputs match the organization's goals. So human resources may be responsible for developing or obtaining questionnaires and other devices for measuring performance. Questionnaires, that would be typically more of a qualitative type measure. It can be quantitative in some instances. It could focus on the short term or it could focus on the long term. And it's typically completed by the employee supervisor. So again, once you hit the workforce, a lot of you are probably already in the workforce, so you probably know this already. You're going to have evaluations. You're going to be evaluated by a superior, and then there's you get a copy of that evaluation and a chance to comment on it. agree or refute with what was said, and then that will of course be kept on file by your employer, by the firm. All right, planning and administering pay and benefits is of course another important responsibility of human resource departments. So things like how much you make, so your salary, your wages, bonuses, commissions, any other performance related pay. Um, They'll also help determine which benefits to offer and how much of the cost is shared by employees. So when they say the cost is shared by employees, an example would be a lot of companies subsidize they don't necessarily tell you this, but they kind of subsidize your healthcare. Um, so of course they need systems for keeping track of employees' earnings and benefits. And employees need information about benefit plans. If I'm coming to work here, like what health insurance do I have? What dental insurance do I have? What, optical insurance do I have? Accidental death and disability, AD&D, so on and so forth. So, of course, with that comes extensive record keeping and reporting. Also, maintaining positive employee relations. This, of course, is important for morale, among other reasons. So, preparing and distributing employee handbooks and company publications, responding to communications from employees. And one example of when they might hear from employees is maybe during open enrollment. Somebody might inquire, like, when is open enrollment? Um, Another big one they may deal with, especially in bigger companies, is negotiating or helping to negotiate union contracts and maintaining communication with union representatives. So also establishing and administering personnel policies. So there have to be policies put in place to make sure that there are fair and equitable hiring policies, fair and equitable discipline policies, fair and equitable promotion policies, and of course, fair and equitable benefits. So human resource personnel communicate through a variety of channels. So of course, when you first get a job, you'll probably have some kind of human resources HR onboarding. It could be remote, could be in person. Probably depending on if you're going to be remote or in person. They may come and present at meetings, probably post documents online. So a lot of companies will have what's called an intranet. So not internet, but intranet. So it's like an internet, but just inside that company. They'll probably send you stuff in email. They may post on social media. And there's other ways that they might communicate with you as well. Managing and using human resource data. So, of course, handling records while protecting privacy. Obviously, as an employee, you have a right to privacy. So you have a right to, assume, expect that the company makes sure that your information is not given out without your permission to any other third parties. And of course, workforce analytics. So use of quantitative tools and scientific methods to analyze data from human resource databases and of course other sources to make evidence-based decisions that support business goals. They also have to ensure compliance with labor laws. So this could include equal employment opportunity, that's the EEOC, we'll talk about those later, employee safety and health, employee benefits and pay, things like job security, we just talked about employee privacy. And government requirements include filing reports and displaying posters. One example would be OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration. So that poster has to be displayed prominently in the workplace so employees can see it. And of course, they have to help make sure that the firm and its employees avoid unlawful behavior. So lawsuits continue to influence HRM practices concerning job security. So as people sue, win, lose, it's likely that the sort of the body of law in this area will slowly continue to change to evolve. And we also deal with things like employment at will, age discrimination, so on and so forth. We kind of touched on this briefly earlier in the lecture, but I'll just mention it again. Human resource planning. Identifying the numbers and types of employees the organization requires in order to meet objectives. So, that isn't just looking at like how many people we have now, but how many people are we likely to need in the future. Talent management. Systematic planned effort to attract, retain, develop, and motivate highly skilled employees and managers. And evidence-based human resources, which deals with collecting and using data to show HR practices have a positive influence on the company's bottom line or key stakeholders. Because if it doesn't, then they're likely going to want to change that. So some other things that human resource departments are often charged with doing: supporting the organization's strategy. That kind of goes for every department in a firm. Managing change by applying knowledge of human behavior along with performance management tools. to help the organization manage change in a constructive manner. Sustainability, the ability to profit without depleting resources, including employees, natural resources, and the support of the surrounding community. So, sustainability, of course, in the last few years has taken on a much greater importance, as it should. Stakeholders, parties with an interest in the company's success. Yeah, these could include shareholders, community, customers, and employees. A lot of people think stakeholders and they think shareholders. Shareholders are an example of stakeholders, but stakeholders is much more encompassing. Again, think about the community that the firm operates in. Its customers, employees, vendors could be another example. What about the human resources responsibilities of supervisors? So supervisors at a startup, the company's founders are of course the first supervisors because when the company is first incepted, there's only going to be probably a handful of people at best. Now supervisors have many HR responsibilities. So they must consider the ways that decisions and policies will affect their employees. So these are some things that supervisors are likely going to be involved in a typical firm. And most of these, I think, you will look at and say, yeah, that makes sense. Probably going to help define job responsibilities. They're probably going to help forecast human resources needs. They're going to help with training. They're certainly going to communicate policies as that stuff is sort of pushed down the organization. They're going to help motivate with support from pay, benefits, and other rewards. They're certainly going to, usually through an appraisal and performance at the very bottom here, they're going to recommend pay increases and promotions. And they're likely also going to help interview and select candidates for jobs. Now, ethics in human resource management. So obviously ethics is, I think everybody knows what ethics is, the fundamental principles of right and wrong. So treatment of employees is a top concern, such as the treatment of women in the workplace. So the behavior that is consistent with those principles in the affirmative would of course be classed as and denoted as ethical behavior. And of course, many ethical issues in the workplace involve human resources management. So here are some employee rights. Obviously, the right to consent freely. You should not be forced to make a decision under duress. You have a right to privacy. Again, like I mentioned earlier in the lecture, your private information that you've given to the employer, social security number, tax information, tax filing status, for example, is all private. Freedom of conscience, you have a right to your beliefs, and an employer should not try to sway you from those beliefs. You have the right to freedom of speech, obviously within reason, and you have the right to due process. So, if you're accused of doing something in the workplace, then you shouldn't just be immediately fired. There should be a process of, sort of an investigatory process. So, standards for ethical behavior. So, ethical companies act according to four principles. So, the four principles are as follows. Number one, they emphasize mutual benefits in relationships with customers, vendors, and clients. So, think of that as like a two-way street. Employees assume responsibility for the actions of the company because you are the company to the people outside that you deal with. Have a sense of purpose or vision that employees value and use in their day-to-day work. And of course, we should always emphasize fairness. Okay, thanks for watching, and I will see you in another video.